Module 9 is all about functions, and we've actually seen functions before and we've used them a whole bunch. We just haven't really thought about it a whole lot. So here's an example of a function. It's called the print function, and you can see how it works. Print is called, and we pass it this string, and this string is the string hi. And what happens is some code that we can't see. It's somewhere in the background, but what it does is it prints hi to the screen, and you know that if I run this, it prints out a hi. So the print is just a built-in function in Python. But we can actually design our own functions for Python. Now, because we are going to be designing our own functions in Python, we need to come up with names for our functions. And just like when we name variables, we can't choose names that are reserved words in Python. So for example, you can't call your function print. There's already a function called print. Okay, so the very first thing that we need is we need to put def. And that means that we're going to be defining a function, and then we print the name of our function next. So for example, we could have a function called instructions. So we have def instructions. The next thing we need is a pair of brackets and a colon. Now inside these brackets sometimes we'll be putting stuff, but we're going to start it as simple as we can. So right now we're just going to leave it blank. And we have to have a colon, just like on loops or if statements, those kinds of things. And then we hit enter, and we'll see that we're indented in one space. Everything that's indented now will be a part of our function called instructions. Now, as you may have guessed, my function instructions is just going to be printing instructions to the screen. Okay, so here we have our function called instructions, and you can see there are 4 print statements that are inside this function. Now, if I go and I run this program, you can see there it ran, and there's no output. But what actually happened is, okay, I've got this stuff right here, but that's sort of like just saying x equals 5. And then I run the program. Of course, nothing's going to happen as we can see it. We set x equal to 5, but that's it. Nothing else has happened. So what we need to do is we need to actually call our function instructions. So in order to call a function, you just use it like you would a variable. So instructions. And those brackets do need to be there so that we know it is a function. So this line right here is going to call this function right here. And so when I go and run this, you can see that it printed out these 4 lines that I had inside my function. So anytime you call a function, basically what's happening is the computer looks in and says, all right, I'm going to look for the function called instructions. It just pops up here for a second. It runs through the lines of code that are inside this function. And then when it's done, it comes back down to here and continues on with the rest of your program. Now you could very easily argue right here, yeah, but Mr. Pollock, why don't we just have these 4 print lines of code and not have it inside a function? Then I'm only using 4 lines of code instead of 6. Well, that's actually true in this case. But what if we wanted to keep doing something over and over again? For example, in Pygame, we've calculated distance, right? What if instead of a function called instructions, we had a function called getDistance? And we just used 2 pairs of coordinates in order to calculate the distance between them. Okay, that's something that we would want to do over and over and over again. So functions are very good for reusing code multiple times. And the second thing that functions are good for is functions are very good at making your code much more readable, following the logic of your program. So imagine we had a program that looked something like this. All it said was get input, draw car, draw pylons, move the car, check for collisions, update the score. That's a very easy program to follow. Now all of the details of how we're actually getting the input, how we're actually drawing the car, how we're drawing the pylons, how we move the car, all of those things can be inside functions. But when we actually go and read through the main body of our code, we would just see these functions and we would think, okay, first I'm going to get the input, then I'm going to draw the car, then I'm going to draw the pylons, then I'm going to move the car, then I'm going to check for collisions, and lastly I'm going to update the score. Okay, so it actually helps your code be much, much more readable and organized. Now the last example I have for you here is a Pygame example, and let's say I wanted to be drawing a rocket ship. Well, if you look down here in my main loop, you can see that I have my events in Pygame. So if I click on the X, it quits. But then I just have this code, this simple code in my loop. It just says draw background, then it says draw ship, and then we're flipping the display and we're limiting our frame rate. Okay, this is a very, very easy program to understand what's happening. Draw the background, draw the ship, flip the display. And so what we can do is, okay, draw background. Well, what's happening in draw background? Well, we can look up here and we can see all we're doing is we're filling the window. Now you could have a whole bunch of other code in here, right? If you had some roads on your background or some clouds or the moon or stars or whatever your background is, you could have all of that code in here, and that way whenever you call draw background, all of that code is organized in here and it makes your program so much more readable. Now the other thing that I have is draw ship, and you can see my draw ship function here. You can see I'm drawing 2 rectangles, I'm drawing a polygon, I'm actually drawing 3 polygons here, and all of these are just pieces of a rocket ship that I designed. But instead of taking my main loop, the main processes in my program, and cluttering it up with a whole bunch of draw rectangles and polygons, all I have is draw ship. So if I run this program, there we go, we've got a background, and here is my rocket ship, and it's drawn the ship to the screen. Now I want to point out one more thing that is very, very helpful when we're designing our functions, and that is have some sort of comment at the start of the function that tells you, or tells whoever's reading your code, what the function is supposed to be doing. So it says this function draws a rocket ship. That's what this function is designed to do. It's just to draw it. Draw background. This function draws the background. Now of course my names of my functions should be pretty descriptive, but when the functions get a little bit longer and when we're passing values to it, then what we want to do is we want to have some sort of description as to what the function does.